This little piece of clay from the library's collections is packed full of information from 4,200 years ago. The language of the inscription is Sumerian.
A single explosive claim is currently tearing through the internet. That ancient Sumerian records contain a forbidden catalog of 5 pre-human species and the precise, terrifying details of their extinction. It is a story of lost biology and alien heritage buried in the ruins of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. But is this a genuine historical discovery or a masterclass in modern digital manipulation? While millions are being drawn into this narrative of hidden pasts and ancient technology, the reality etched into these clay tablets is far more unsettling. We are not looking at extraterrestrial biology, but at something profoundly human: the controversial myths of gods. The internet is currently obsessed with the singular, provocative claim that ancient Sumerian tablets reveal the existence of 5 distinct pre-human species, and that we are essentially living in the shadow of their mysterious extinction. It is a narrative that promises forbidden knowledge and alien biology buried in the dirt of southern Iraq. But if you actually sit down with the primary texts, the thousands of cuneiform tablets recovered from cities like Eridu and Nippur, you discover something far more unsettling than science fiction. You find a reality where the so-called gods were not benevolent extraterrestrial scientists, but a deeply dysfunctional, terrifying administrative bureaucracy that viewed the cosmos as a high-stakes corporate enterprise. The Anunnaki were never a biological species. The name itself, derived from the Sumerian terms for princely offspring or offspring of An, the supreme sky god, tells us exactly what they were: the ruling council of the divine state. In the earliest records from the 3rd millennium BCE, they weren't traveling through deep space. They were cosmic administrators. They were the architects of order, assigned by the gods of the heavens to regulate the tides, the seasons, and the chaotic machinery of the universe. Yet, over the slow, grinding centuries, their reputation shifted. By the time of the Middle Babylonian period, these same figures had been relegated to the cold, dark corners of the chthonic realm. They became the judges of the dead, sitting on golden thrones in the underworld under the dominion of Ereshkigal. They were not pilots of starships, but the grim bureaucrats of the afterlife, cataloging the souls of those who had departed the mortal coil. To understand why a Sumerian would fear them, you have to look at the concept of Milam. This wasn't just a metaphor for greatness, it was a literal, physiological aura of divine splendor. To encounter a deity was to experience a physical, terrifying feedback loop. A radiant, glowing presence so potent it inspired raw, visceral fear. It was an aura of power that could drop a mortal to their knees through sheer atmospheric pressure. But behind that terrifying glow sat personalities that would have felt uncomfortably familiar to any human king. These deities were hyper-anthropomorphized projections of human volatility. They were immortal, yes, but they were also prone to irrational anger, intense jealousy, and, perhaps most surprisingly, a legendary weakness for alcohol. They were effectively capricious royals who existed on a cosmic scale. Their history is not one of meticulous genetic engineering, but of messy, drunken impulse. Consider the exploits of Enki, the Lord of Wisdom, and the subterranean freshwater Apsu. He was known for his brilliant counsel, but he was also known for getting entirely too intoxicated and engaging in complex, often disastrous creative contests with the mother goddess Ninhursag. Their motivation for creating us was not love, nor was it a desire to seed life across the stars. It was a desperate, pragmatic solution to a labor crisis that threatened to collapse the divine order. Before humans existed, the lesser deities, the Igigi, were the ones expected to maintain the earth. They were the ones assigned to dredge the silt-choked channels of the Tigris and Euphrates and dig the irrigation canals necessary to feed the cities. It was backbreaking, endless drudgery. Eventually, these lesser gods simply broke. They revolted, throwing down their tools and refusing to labor another day. Faced with a complete breakdown of their infrastructure, the high gods turned to Namu, the primordial sea goddess, to solve their problem. Their solution was to fashion servants from the fertile clay of the Apsu, mixed with the blood of a sacrificed deity. They created humanity not as equals or experiments, but as a workforce. We were designed as divine janitors, created specifically to bear the physical yoke of labor and relieve the gods of their drudgery. The next time you find yourself frustrated by the weight of daily responsibilities, remember that in the ancient Mesopotamian mind, that burden was not an accident. It was the very reason for your existence. The Anunnaki were not looking down from the stars to guide us. They were looking down from their palaces, demanding that we keep the irrigation canals flowing so they could continue their own turbulent, indulgent lives. The concerns of creation myths. If you peel back the layers of ancient mythology, you find that the origin of humanity was never a grand, benevolent gesture. It was a messy, desperate administrative fix. According to the Atrahasis epic, the cosmos was originally maintained by the Igigi, a class of lesser deities tasked with the brutal, never-ending labor of dredging silt from the rivers and carving irrigation canals into the parched earth of Mesopotamia. After years of this soul-crushing drudgery, the Igigi finally snapped. They revolted against the high god Enki, burning their tools and demanding relief. Faced with the collapse of the earthly environment, Enki didn't look for an alternative. He looked for a workforce. He turned to the primordial sea goddess Namu, and together they fashioned the first humans from the clay of the Apsu, animating the mud with the blood of a sacrificed deity. This was our beginning. We were not born of love, but of a labor shortage. We were created specifically to be the permanent, living equipment for a divine construction project. The true nature of this arrangement comes into sharp focus during the famous, and frankly unsettling, contest between Enki and the mother goddess Ninmah. During a celebratory feast, fueled by an excessive amount of beer, the two deities entered a high-stakes challenge to see who could create more functional beings. Ninmah, the sculptor of flesh, began to mold 6 humans from clay, each one afflicted with severe physical disabilities. She created a person who could not see, a woman who could never bear children, and individuals burdened with shaking hands or withered bodies. In her arrogance, she challenged Enki to find a place for these broken beings in society. Enki, with his characteristic drunken ingenuity, didn't discard them. He found a role for every single one. He turned the sightless man into a singer of tales and appointed the man with trembling hands as a royal servant. It is a profound meditation on the human condition, suggesting that even in our most limited, damaged states, we have a purpose in the machine of the state. But the story turns dark when Enki takes his turn at the clay. Heavily intoxicated, he fashions Umuul, a creature so malformed that it could not stand, sit, or even feed itself. It was a complete, non-viable failure. Even with his divine wisdom, Enki could find no societal role for this creature, proving that even the gods were capable of profound, tragic errors. We are the products of a divine drunkard's competition, walking a thin line between functional utility and total obsolescence. This fragility was not just physical, but existential. Look at the legend of Adapa, the king and sage of the ancient city of Eridu. Adapa was granted massive intellectual power by Enki, but he was intentionally denied the gift of immortality. After he cursed the south wind for capsizing his boat, he was summoned to the heavens to answer to the sky god Anu. Enki, displaying his usual manipulative cunning, warned Adapa that if Anu offered him food, he should refuse it, claiming it was the food of death. But Anu was actually impressed by Adapa's intellect and offered him the bread and water of eternal life. Tricked by his own patron god, Adapa declined the gift. Because of that single lie, humanity was permanently locked into mortality. Our death was not a biological inevitability or a law of nature. It was a bureaucratic trap designed to ensure that we would never rise above our station as servants. This theme of subservience bleeds into the Great Flood narratives as well. When the clamor of the human population became too loud for the divine assembly to endure, the god Enlil didn't seek to reform or guide us. He simply decided to erase the entire workforce. The only reason we survived the Great Deluge is because Enki secretly warned Atrahasis to build a boat. We are survivors of a divine call, constantly reminded that our existence is entirely subject to the whims of entities who view us as little more than pawns in their own volatile celestial power struggles. We were never meant to be immortal, and we were never meant to be free. We were built to serve. We were built to break, and we were built to be replaceable. Linguistic and translation controversies. We are often told that the past is a locked room, and that the key is a forgotten language that only a select few are allowed to handle. This idea of a secret, hidden history is incredibly seductive. It thrives because of a very real, very stubborn hurdle known as the Sumerian problem. Sumerian is a linguistic isolate, a tongue with no known relatives in the history of human speech. It did not evolve from a neighbor, and it left no direct descendants. When you look at a cuneiform tablet, you aren't just looking at ancient letters. You're staring at an agglutinative system where word roots are modified by a complex, rigid web of prefixes and suffixes. And that is before you account for polyvalence. In this system, a single sign can mean mouth, speaking, nose, or even stealing, depending entirely on the context of the sentence. Trying to translate these tablets is not a simple matter of looking up words in a dictionary. It is a high-stakes puzzle where one wrong turn changes the entire meaning of the text. This structural complexity is precisely why fringe theorists have been able to build an entire industry on misinformation. There is a massive, uncomfortable vacuum in our records. In the British Museum alone, there are over 130,000 tablets and fragments sitting in storage, many of which have never been touched by a modern eye. When a society is presented with a gap in knowledge of this magnitude, the human mind naturally wants to fill it. Alternative historians have been all too happy to oblige, feeding the public a diet of forbidden, suppressed, and secret truths. They exploit the fact that most people will never spend a decade learning to parse archaic Sumerian grammar. They count on that ignorance, and they use it to turn legitimate linguistic ambiguity into a weapon of mass confusion. Take the term Dingur. In the hands of someone like Zecharia Sitchin, this symbol, a simple star-shaped determinative used to denote divinity, was transformed into proof of blazing rockets and extraterrestrial technology. He stripped the word of its actual purpose, which was merely to alert a reader that the following name belonged to a god, and recast it as a mechanical, propulsive description. It is a complete fabrication. There is no bilingual lexical list, no historical grammar, and no context in which Dingur refers to kinetic energy or aerospace engineering. It is an administrative marker, no different from a modern label, yet it is presented as the smoking gun of an ancient space program. The same linguistic gymnastics are applied to the term Nephilim. If you want to sell a story about ancient astronauts, you force a connection between the Hebrew word and the idea of falling from the stars in a spacecraft. But the morphology simply does not hold up. If the word were truly derived from the Hebrew verb naphal, meaning to fall, the grammar of the ancient text would necessitate a spelling of Nephilim. The word is actually an Aramaic loanword, plain and simple, meaning giants or powerful men. These are not translations, they are linguistic parlor tricks. Alternative historians are not uncovering hidden truths, they are creating them by ignoring the scribal reality of the ancient world. They ignore that cuneiform was a tool for the state, designed to track temple inventory and document the divine right of kings. By ripping these words from their bureaucratic, religious, and political contexts, they have successfully manufactured a fantasy version of Mesopotamia. They have taken the mundane reality of early urbanization, the ledgers, the hymns, the tax receipts, and turned them into a sci-fi epic. The true mystery of Sumer is not that they were visited by aliens, but that they managed to invent writing, urbanization, and law in a volatile, harsh river valley without any outside help at all. The real story is far more impressive, but it requires the one thing that fringe theorists never offer: a respect for the hard, boring, and brilliant work of actual historical investigation. The rise of ancient astronaut theories. In 1976, Zecharia Sitchin published The 12th Planet, and with it, he effectively rewrote the history of the human race for millions of people. He didn't just write a book, he synthesized a complete, pseudoscientific mythology that felt more compelling than the dry, fractured reality of the archaeological record. Sitchin claimed the Anunnaki weren't Mesopotamian deities, but extraterrestrial visitors from a planet called Nibiru, an orb with an elongated 600-year orbit. He told a story of a desperate, resource-starved civilization landing on Earth 500,000 years ago, not to save us, but to mine gold to shield their planet's failing atmosphere. In his version of events, we are the product of genetic slavery, the result of alien engineers splicing their own DNA into hominids to create a docile workforce for their mines. It is a narrative that has since exploded across the internet, finding a permanent home in the modern digital zeitgeist. There is a powerful, almost intoxicating allure to these ideas. Proponents love to point at the Apkallu, the 7 sages of Sumer, and link them to the Dogon people's Nomo, or the Vedic Saptarishis. They argue that because these cultures across the globe all have myths about amphibious, fish-like teachers who brought law and civilization, it must be proof of a singular, extraterrestrial intervention. It feels like an elegant answer to the chaotic, disconnected puzzles of the ancient world. If you look at the human brain, it is hardwired to seek patterns and narratives of external influence. It is easier to believe in a benevolent, or even cold and calculated alien progenitor than it is to grapple with the reality that human ancestors, living in the volatile floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates, possessed the raw, unaided brilliance to invent writing, mathematics, and urban planning from scratch. When you strip away the science fiction, you find that the ancient astronaut theory is not merely a harmless, imaginative hobby. It is, at its core, a form of modern intellectual colonialism. Every time someone claims that the Sumerians needed a spacefaring hand to help them stack bricks or devise an irrigation system, they are explicitly telling the world that these people were too primitive, too incapable, and too unintelligent to build their own destiny. It is a systematic, arrogant stripping of human achievement. It treats the foundational accomplishments of early civilization as impossible artifacts that require a superior, non-human agency to explain. This perspective robs the Sumerians of their true historical brilliance. They did not have telescopes to see the moons of Uranus, nor did they have the chemical knowledge to understand extraterrestrial gold mining. They had something much more impressive: an absolute, unrelenting drive to organize their society in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They were fighting floods, managing the labor of a growing city-state, and developing a complex, beautiful, and highly functioning culture using nothing but clay, reeds, and their own minds. To reduce these people to the puppets of spacefaring miners is to insult their memory. We have reached a point where the comfort of a high-tech, alien-created past has completely overshadowed the, frankly, more miraculous reality of human ingenuity. The ancient astronaut narrative is a seductive, persistent echo chamber that keeps us from seeing what was actually there in the dirt of Iraq. Not star gods, but people who taught themselves how to be human. Historical accuracy versus esoteric claims. If the ancient astronaut theory were true, if there were really extraterrestrial gold miners and genetic engineers roaming the plains of ancient Iraq, the evidence would be impossible to keep buried. You would see it everywhere, screaming from the archaeological record. You would expect to find anomalous metal alloys that shouldn't exist in the Bronze Age, non-human skeletal remains tucked away in the city strata, or microscopic genetic markers in the soil that defy terrestrial biology. Yet, after generations of meticulous, back-breaking excavation in legendary cities like Uruk, Eridu, and Kish, we have unearthed millions of artifacts, household pots, grain inventories, personal seals, and endless tax records. We have found the debris of human life, but not a single gear, not one circuit board, and not one piece of technology that falls outside the reach of human ingenuity. The smoking gun simply does not exist. The ground remains, as it always has, stubbornly and purely human. The confusion begins the moment we force our modern, rigid obsession with objective, chronological history onto a culture that viewed time and authority through a completely different lens. Consider the famous Sumerian king list. It features monarchs who reigned for 20, 30, or even 40,000 years. If you read that list as a modern historian demands, as a dry, factual biography, it looks like definitive proof of long-lived supernatural beings. But if you read it as the Sumerians intended, you see a masterfully crafted political tool. These lists were never meant to be a calendar. They were designed to establish the divine legitimacy of a city-state's ruling dynasty by anchoring their current power in the deepest, most mythical past. The truth of their narrative was measured by its spiritual weight and political impact, not by the mundane tally of years. The modern narrative of a grand, sweeping academic cover-up is arguably the most brilliant marketing strategy in the history of alternative archaeology. By framing their baseless claims as forbidden history, these writers effectively turn a total lack of evidence into a badge of honor. It is a cynical, parasitic business model. They tell their audience that mainstream academics are a corrupt, dogmatic cabal working to suppress the truth, which makes the reader feel like a revolutionary, a seeker of forbidden knowledge and a victim of a vast conspiracy every time they buy a book or click on a video. It weaponizes the public's natural curiosity and lack of access to dense, technical, cuneiform studies, turning the rigorous, albeit slow, process of academic peer review into a convenient narrative of suppression. Nowhere is this cynical decontextualization more obvious than in the viral visual representation of the Apkallu. You have almost certainly seen the images, shared across social media and presented as absolute proof, claiming that these 7 sages were wearing high-tech scuba gear or pressurized spacesuits. But if you actually walk into the archives and cross-reference the iconography with the ritual texts, the reality is far more grounded and infinitely more intense. Those fish-like figures are not wearing diving equipment. They are wearing the physical, pungent, carefully dried skins of the Puradu, a giant carp native to the Tigris and Euphrates. These were the ritual garments of high-ranking exorcist priests. When a priest donned a fish skin, he wasn't preparing for an underwater mission. He was embodying the sacred, chaotic waters of the Apsu to perform a harrowing ritual of purification and protection. The image of a priest standing in a sweltering, crowded temple, draped in the literal, rotting skin of a fish to drive away sickness, madness, and misfortune, is far more haunting and human than any sanitized science fiction story about alien spacesuits. It is a visceral, sensory, and terrifying experience of faith. When we replace that reality with the sterile, clean aesthetic of a sci-fi spacesuit, we lose the messiness of the human past. We strip away the struggle, the fear, and the profound religious devotion of a real civilization, replacing it with a cartoonish version of our own modern technological obsessions. We don't need aliens to explain the wonders of Mesopotamia. We just need to stop looking for reflections of ourselves in the past and start looking at the real, complicated, and deeply human people who actually lived there. Their brilliance was not a gift from the stars. It was a fire they lit for themselves in the dark. The debates of technology and research. We often imagine that archaeology is a slow, dusty pursuit performed by people squinting at broken rocks in basement archives. But behind the scenes of major institutions, a quiet, high-stakes digital revolution is currently unfolding. Assyriology has moved into the age of the algorithm. Through the development of the Electronic Babylonian Library, or EBL, and datasets like some tablets, scholars are no longer just manually piecing together broken shards of history. They are now utilizing transformer-based artificial intelligence to do the impossible. They are digitally reassembling the shattered consciousness of ancient Mesopotamia. These machine learning models are now capable of achieving an astonishing 97% accuracy in automated transliteration, effectively doing the work of a lifetime in a matter of seconds. Think about the sheer scale of this puzzle. Thousands of clay tablets have been fragmented for millennia, scattered across museums from London to Baghdad. A single literary epic might be split into 50 pieces, with each piece sitting in a different country, gathering dust. This was a barrier that human eyes simply could not overcome. But the new pattern-matching software changes everything. Recently, this technology achieved a breakthrough that felt like magic. Researchers in Munich and Baghdad took thousands of photographs of scattered fragments and fed them into the EBL platform. The AI identified the microscopic physical matches between these pieces, effectively stitching a postcard-sized fragment in a Baghdad storeroom to 30 other broken shards across the globe. Together, they reconstructed two-thirds of a lost 3,000-year-old hymn, a song praising the majesty of Babylon that had not been read by a human being since the fall of the city. This creates a sharp, undeniable contradiction to the conspiracy theories that claim academics are hiding forbidden history. The reality is quite the opposite. We are currently living in the most transparent, accessible era of Mesopotamian study and history. Platforms like the EBL and the open richly annotated cuneiform corpus are open access, meaning they are available to anyone with an internet connection. They include searchable dictionaries and tools that allow you to bypass the speculative, sensationalized translations of internet gurus and go straight to the primary bilingual lexical lists. This is not a closed circle of elites. It is the democratization of the ancient world. The problem is that these complex, scholarly databases require effort and patience to navigate, while the internet is built for rapid, emotional, and algorithmic reinforcement. Misinformation is packaged into short, punchy videos that play into our desire for mysteries and alien interventions, spreading like wildfire while the real, rigorous research is being done quietly in the background. It is a competition for the public imagination, and for a long time the conspiracy theories have been winning because they are easier to consume than the actual, complicated human brilliance of the Sumerian people. But this race is not over. We are currently in a golden age of historical discovery, driven by an urgent need for preservation. With thousands of sites in southern Iraq still vulnerable to the ravages of time and looting, and fragile, unbaked clay tablets deteriorating in museum vaults, we are in a high-stakes race to save the earliest records of human civilization. Artificial intelligence is not just a tool for research, it is our best chance to capture the voice of the past before it vanishes into dust. When we finally look at the evidence as it truly is, decoded by these advanced digital systems, we don't find extraterrestrial masters. We find something far more awe-inspiring. We find a society that, without any outside help, built the first schools, the first laws, and the first cities. The history revealed by these machines is not a mystery to be solved with alien contact theories. It is a testament to the raw, creative, and resilient spirit of humanity. The clay is finally starting to speak for itself, and what it has to say is far more fascinating than any conspiracy ever could be.